Man Visible and Invisible by C.W. Leadbeater. Chapter 18. Colors and Their Meaning. Before we can intelligently study the details of these various bodies, we must familiarize ourselves with the general meaning of the various shades of color in them, as shown in our frontispiece. It will be realized that an almost infinite variety is possible in their combination. I am endeavoring to give as nearly as possible the exact shade which expresses the unmixed emotion whose name is attached to it, but human emotions are hardly ever unmixed, and so we have constantly to classify or to analyze indeterminate hue in that formation of which many factors have played their part. Anger, for example, is represented by scarlet, and love by crimson and rose. But both anger and love are often deeply tinged with selfishness, and just so far as that is the case, will the purity of their respective colors be dimmed by the hard brown-gray which is so characteristic of this vice. Or again, either of them may be mingled with pride, and that would instantly show itself by a tinge of deep orange. Many examples of such commingling and of the resultant shades of color will be seen as we continue our investigation. But our first endeavor must be to learn to read the meaning of the simpler hues. We will give here a list of some of these which are most common. Black. Thick black clouds in the astral body mark the presence of hatred and malice. When a person unhappily gives way to a fit of passionate anger, the terrible thought forms of hate may generally be seen floating in his aura like coils of heavy poisonous smoke. Red. Deep red flashes usually on a black background show anger, and this will be more or less tinged with brown, as there is more or less of direct selfishness in this type of anger. What is sometimes called noble indignation on behalf of someone oppressed or injured may express itself in flashes of brilliant scarlet on the ordinary background of the aura. Lurid, sanguinary red, a color which is quite unmistakable, though not easy to describe, indicates sensuality. Brown. Dull brown red, almost a rust color, means avarice, and it usually arranges itself in parallel bars across the astral body, giving a very curious appearance. Dull, hard, brown-gray signifies selfishness, and is, unfortunately, one of the very commonest colors in the astral body. Greenish-brown, lit up by deep red or scarlet flashes, denotes jealousy, and in the case of the ordinary man, there is nearly always a good deal of this color present when he is what is called in love. Gray. Heavy leaden gray expresses deep depression, and where this is habitual in its presence, is sometimes indescribably gloomy and saddening. This color also has the curious characteristic of arranging itself in parallel lines as that of avarice, and both give the impression that their unfortunate victim is imprisoned within a kind of astral cage. Livid gray, a most hideous and frightful hue, betokens fear. Crimson. This color is the manifestation of love, and is often the most beautiful feature in the vehicle of the average man. Naturally, it varies greatly with the nature of the love. It may be dull, heavy, and deeply tinged with the brown of selfishness, if the so-called love occupies itself chiefly with the consideration how much affection it is receiving from someone else, how much return it is getting for its investment. But if the love be that kind of love that thinks never of itself at all, nor of what it receives, but only of how much it can give and how entirely it can pour itself as a willing sacrifice for the sake of the loved one, then it will express itself in the most lovely rose color. And when this rose color is exceptionally brilliant and tinged with lilac, it proclaims the more spiritual love for humanity. The intermediate possibilities are countless, and the affection may of course be tinged in various other ways, as by pride or jealousy. Orange. This color is always significant of pride or ambition, and has almost as many variations as the last mentioned, according to the nature of the pride or the ambition. It is not infrequently found in union with irritability. Yellow. This is a very good color, implying always the possession of intellectuality. Its shades vary, and it may be complicated by the admixture of various other hues. Generally speaking, it has a deeper and duller tint if the intellect is directed chiefly into lower channels, most especially if the objects are selfish. But it becomes brilliantly golden and rises gradually to a beautiful, clear, luminous yellow or primrose yellow as it is addressed to higher and more unselfish objects. Green. No color has more varied signification than this, and it requires some study to interpret it correctly. Most of its manifestations indicate a kind of adaptability, at first evil and deceitful, but eventually good and sympathetic. Gray-green, a peculiar shade which signifies deceit and cunning, will be found very prominently in the astral bodies of most primitives. It is by no means rare among civilized men who ought long ago to have passed the stage of evolution which it indicates. As the man advances, this hue improves into a bright emerald green, which still means versatility, ingenuity, and quickness of resource, but no longer implies any evil intent in connection with these qualities. It indicates the power of being all things to all men, not now for the purpose of tricking or misleading them, but at first in order to please them, to obtain their praise or their favor, and later on, as understanding develops, for the purpose of helping and strengthening them. Eventually it becomes a lovely, pale, luminous blue-green, such as may sometimes be seen in an exceptionally delicate sunset sky. And then it shows some of the grandest qualities of human nature, the deepest sympathy and compassion, with the power of perfect adaptability which only they can give. In its earlier development, a bright apple green seems always to accompany strong vitality. Blue. Dark, clear blue usually betokens religious feeling, but this also varies according to the type of the feeling, its purity or its bigotry, its selfishness or nobility. It is liable to be tinted by almost any of the qualities previously mentioned, so that we may have any shade from indigo on one side and rich, deep violet on the other, down to a muddy gray-blue, which is at the level of the fetish worship. The tinge of love or fear, of deceit or of pride may mingle with the hue of religion, and thus there is a wide range of variation observable. Light blue marks devotion to a noble spiritual ideal, and gradually rises to a luminous lilac blue, which signifies the higher spirituality, and is usually accompanied by sparkling golden stars, representing elevated spiritual aspirations. It is easy to understand how almost infinite may be the combinations and modifications of all these hues, so that the most delicate graduation of character, or the most evanescent of mingled feelings, is expressed with the greatest accuracy. The general brilliance of the astral body, the comparative definitiveness or indefinitiveness of its outline, and the relative brightness of the different centers of force are all points which have to be taken into consideration in reading the full meaning of what is seen. Another fact worth mentioning is Another fact worth mentioning is that developed or developing psychical faculties show themselves by means of the colors which lie beyond the visible spectrum, so that it is impossible to picture them with physical hues. The ultraviolet tints denote the higher and purer development, while gruesome combinations of ultra-red reveal the wickedness of the dabbler in evil and selfish forms of magic. Occult advancement proclaims itself not only by these colors, but also by the greater luminosity of the various bodies, and by their increased size and more definite outline.